Hello F11 members and welcome to the Fundamentals of Post-Production video tutorials for issue 63, that's April 2017. In the How It's Done feature in this month's issue, I've written a piece entitled Saving Time in the Digital Darkroom with 12 pointers, I think, which are key to making sure you're organized and time efficient when doing your post-production. Let's face it, we're all short of time, aren't we? So I thought what I'd do this month in the video tutorials is take you through an edit of a shoot I've done recently in London and try and apply some of those principles to that edit. So all I've done at the moment is copy the images to a folder straight. I've taken off the memory card, copied the images to a folder on my computer. So now I'm going to go into Lightroom and import those images. So if I click on import, two things to just look at before I go any further is up here it says apply during import, and you'll see I've got develop settings. I'm using a preset called DNP1, and metadata, I'm using a preset called DNP1. I'm going to show you what those two presets do after I've imported the images. So I now find the folder that the images are in, and down here in a folder called raw images. Just give me a second, and here they in a subfolder called 2017, and a subfolder called February 2017, and a subfolder called February 21st, 2017. Now what I do is I dump the raws straight off the memory card in those folders that are arranged by date. It's important to me that I have that system that based on when the image was actually captured. So here they come, they're coming in, and if I come down here now, that's just loading the previews there. I'm going to click on import, and in they'll come to Lightroom. So there are some 400 images in this shoot, so I'm just going to pause you as they load. Okay. So all the images have been imported now. It's going to take a few minutes for Lightroom to build all the previews for the images. And if you can see up here in the top of each corner, those three little dots, given time, they eventually disappear as Lightroom builds the previews. Okay, so we just need to give it time to do that. Down here, I can alter the size of my thumbnails. We can have them really big or really small. That's your choice completely. I like them quite big. Helps me to judge which is the best images. But let's just go back to those presets, which I think are really very useful in terms of saving time. First of all, the metadata preset. Can you see here it says preset DNP1, and that has on import added my copyright information, the copyrighted status of the image, and my name, the creator name here, into the metadata of the image. I'm constantly struck by how many images we're sent which have no copyright or creator information in the metadata. So that's one easy thing to take care of. To create your preset, come up here to where it says preset in the library module still, and just click on there, and you come down and it says edit presets, and if you go in there, this dialog will come up and you can create your own preset there. So I'm going to cancel that, and just give me 1 second. And so that's the presets for the metadata. The other thing that I did, now I find these days when I'm doing my post-production on images, I seem to be doing the same thing to every image, particularly in terms of sharpening. let's just go into the develop module very briefly here. And before I start looking at what I'm going to do or selecting the individual images, let's just choose a better image than that. Sorry, come down here. Okay, let's just choose this image here. So if we're going to the develop module, wait for it to load, and I find that I'm applying you will have noticed watching my fundamentals of post-production video tutorials, I always use the Lightroom Sharp and Scenic preset. I then come along here and I adjust my masking by holding down the Alt slider until I get the amount of masking I need. The interesting thing is though that virtually always the settings round about the same. So what I have done is I've created a develop preset which applies that on import. Doesn't mean I can't then subsequently change that, but it just means that that image comes in with that kind of with a masking of around about 10, sorry, exactly 10, and the Lightroom Sharp and Scenic of 40%, radius 0.8 and detail 35 preset. I find it saves me time. The other thing I've done is I've applied just a little bit of vibrance, +6 on import. Again, I can choose to tweak that, either reduce or increase that subsequently, but it's a useful starting point, again, that saves me time. To create these presets, if you come up here on the left to the presets panel, click on the plus there and it says create new preset. Click on that and it will ask you, you then give your preset a name and away you go. It's really useful. So just to recap on that, to create a preset, select an image, do what you want to it in terms of determining what actions your preset's going to do, then come up here, click on the plus button beside the preset in the presets tab there where it says create new preset, and then give it a name and tick all the boxes that you want it to look at, and away you go. Really useful there. I find it very useful for saving time. Okay, let's go back into the library module now, and I'm just going to give this Lightroom a few minutes to build all the presets. So, sorry, not the presets, the previews. So I'm just going to pause you and I'll be right back. So I'm waiting for Lightroom now to build the previews for all the images. I shot this with the 1DX Mark II in London one evening in Canary Wharf with the commuters trudging on their way home from work, and it does take I was fairly trigger happy with the shoot because I was using people in my foreground, so there's a lot of frames here, so it's taken a while to build the previews. Normally with this sort of thing I'd go and have a coffee and do something else while Lightroom chunters through them. Interestingly, when I'm shooting with the 5DSR, the 50 megapixel images of that camera, it takes longer for Lightroom to build the previews. But then again, I tend to shoot fewer frames. So it all balances out one way or another. So what I'm doing is this particular sequence, I'm looking at selecting the best image, which has got Canary Wharf there in the background, but some interesting people interest in my foreground. So now it's pretty much done the previews for all that sequence. So I'm going to start here, and what I do is I've selected fairly large thumbnails to look at, and I would just want to start with one image that jumps out at me initially. It's a starting point. This is not going to be necessarily the definitive image that I'm selecting, but one that immediately strikes me is this one here, of this scene with the businessman walking through my foreground. So what I'm going to do is just enlarge that full screen size and just check for sharpness. So if I click on that and it zooms in, and I can go in further up here if I want to, but that's all very sharp. If you come down here, check my exposure details there, you see I shot this at ISO 3200 ISO and focal length of 16mm with the lens not quite wide open but fairly wide open at f3.5. Shooting handheld to utilize the move, action and be spontaneous. So I think this picture has merit. So what I'm going to do then is go back into the grid mode by clicking on G on my keyboard, and now just let's just compare these two side by side here. That one there, I'm going to start by it has potential, so I'm going to flag it. Come up here, top left, click on the flag. Okay, now let's just look at the image right next to it. What I want to do is determine which is better. So if I go and select both, and now press N on my keyboard, it gives me the two side by side, and I can then judge which is better. And I think this one here, the top one, which has a sort of more definitive body shape to my my foreground, the person in the foreground. So I think that's the better image. And so I'm going to flag that one, come down here, and unflag the other one. And now press keyboard and go back to G. Press G on my keyboard, go back to grid mode, and I've made my first select. So what then I start doing is start going through in each shoot, asking myself, which is it any better than the one I've selected so far, or as good? And some you can judge by the thumbnails, some you need to zoom in and have a look at full size. But I can tell immediately from that sequence that in fact what it looks like is that's the best shot. This one here seems to have potential, so let's just have a look at this full screen. Interesting. Come back out. So if I press G on there, back to G mode, and then select that and the one I've already flagged. Select those two together. Now press N on my keyboard to go back into survey mode, and I can look at the two side by side. And the one I've selected is still much better than that one in my eye. So that's the one I'm keeping. Bear in mind, what we're trying to do here is find the one best shot in this particular sequence, not process loads of similar type images. That's just a waste of time, and no one is interested in your second best images. So press G on my keyboard again and continue working through the shoot, trying to find from this particular sequence whether there are any others that are quite as good as the one I've already selected. That essentially is how I edit a shoot. It may take some time until I find the best image, but I'm always starting with one that jumps out at me and then asking myself, are the subsequent ones as good or better? If they're not as good, I'll ignore them and then subsequently delete them. Yes, delete them. And of course, if they're better, then they become the selected pick and I move on. It's a system that works for me. What is important, of course, is that you have your own system, but I would say try and be methodical in the way you work. Okay, in part 2, I'm going to take you on through this edit and we're going to come to the final end product. So I'll see you in part 2 in just a minute.